We were able to play a sold out show opening for Switchfoot. We got to open for the Newsboys at a Christian music festival. A lot of those things just kind of came about from like persistence, just being like, hey, like, what if we could do this? It's signed a record deal at one point where we were touring like over 100 days a year. I'm like, dude, I feel old because rock and roll years is a real thing. John Foreman from Switchfoot told us that one time, doing my first like national tour. And they're like, oh yeah, like, can you come fly down and leave tomorrow for a tour? And I was like, hold on, let me ask my mom. I think I was like 15.
Welcome to the Creative Tides podcast, where expert insight flows into everyday creative spaces. We bring you conversations with leaders, innovators, and artists, making high-level ideas accessible and practical for your local context. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss any upcoming videos, resources, or events. Discover more episodes and upcoming events at www.creative-tides.com. We're glad you're here. Well, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Ashley, and welcome to the Creative Tides podcast. Our guest today is a passionate musician and storyteller whose journey began with classical piano as a kid, singing in church kids choir, and evolved into a lifelong career behind the drums. By middle school, Jack was already touring nationally, and by high school and college, he'd taken his music international. He's worked with Disney, Grammy Award-winning producers, artists, and music groups, and world-class studios, and now produces audio, visual experiences for events featuring Forbes list billionaires and industry leaders. Jack also works in aviation. He was born in Seattle, and he currently lives in the Pacific Northwest. When he's not making music or managing productions, Jack's on a mission to find the best cheeseburger and the perfect slice of pizza. So I'm excited to welcome Jack Espinosa with us today. Any luck on the cheeseburger and pizza hunt? Have you found any?
Yes. I was over in New York recently, and I was able to try some top 30 spots while I was there. Just for those of you that don't know, and for you that doesn't know, Ashley, Brooklyn in New York has the best pizza in the whole US. I'm convinced. Being in aviation, I have been able to fly around and, try out some different spots over the years, and New York definitely has some of the best pizza ever. So there's a place called Paulie G's in Brooklyn, my favorite.
No, I mean, New York is kind of known for their pizza, so I'm glad to hear it lives up to the hype. I've never been, but I'd love to go. Yeah,
you got to go.
This is fun to interview you because we actually went to the same university, and so we have a little bit of a history, and then I have joined you in working on some of those production
some production events, definitely.
Production events. Yeah.
Yes.
That's what post is for. Yeah, so I've actually joined you in working on some of those production events, which is super fun. Shout out to Derek Hoym with Rain on Me Productions. He is an awesome if you don't know him.
Yes, my guy.
Yes, awesome guy. So we were at Northwest University together, and that's sort of how I first knew about you as a drummer. But take us back before that. In your bio, it mentions that you started on classic piano, and then you transitioned to the drums. What did changing instruments and growing up in a musical household look like for you?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say really quick, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you. The beginning of my story really starts with people just taking chances on me, like you taking a chance with having me on the podcast. I could come on here and say some really unhinged things, but I'm not going to, because I'm not an unhinged person, maybe only in my private time. But when I was really young, some people took some chances on me, when I was in church, and my worship pastor was a classical music teacher. And my parents were like, let's try doing music. And so we were attending church. The church pastor, music pastor, her name was Leilani, and she came to my parents and was like, hey, like, what do you think about me putting Jack and Britt's my older brother, and we can talk about him later because our music journeys are pretty intertwined. She was like, hey, does Britt and Jack want to learn how to play music? And so my parents were like, yes, of course. And so what was really great is while we were in church, getting to see her play music on stage in a worship setting. During the week, we were having weekly lessons with her where she was teaching us classical music because she was classically trained. And so that's where the whole journey really started. I think I started playing classical music. I was playing classical piano from like age 6 or 7. And then I played for almost 10 years. There was a bit of a switch, but we can talk about that later. I switched over to drums a little bit later in my music career when I was really young. But that's how it all got started, was in church. And what was really cool is eventually, as a middle schooler, I was able to play on the adult worship team, playing drums after that transition, when I transitioned from piano to drums. But yeah, that's kind of how everything got started. And it's really, really cool. I really look back on that time fondly. You know, Leilani really made a big impact on me. And there were some really institutional drum instructors as well that made a big impact on me. But that's how I started with classical piano.
Yeah. So did she play classical piano like as a part of worship, like on the worship team, or did she play in a different style?
She played in a different style. That's a really good question. So she brought like a lot of like technical hand movements to her style with playing, but she definitely leaned more into the gospel, like gospel pop, like type of playing while playing on the piano. And obviously it's congregational music, so like it's like meant to be easy to listen to, but like she just brought a lot of technique, and that was really cool to me because I remember seeing her play on Sundays and just being like, wow, I want to play like that one day. And so yeah, she definitely leaned into those gospel styles. I think like CC Winans, Darlene Chesnick, like those styles of worship music, like she was like really good at playing those on piano.
Yeah. As I've worked with different piano players over the years in the worship field, those who have been trained classically on piano, I've found they have a
Mhm.
hard time translating to like playing a chord chart and knowing like
Mm.
they're afraid of overplaying. And so then a lot of times they won't play very much at all. And so I was just curious how she kind of bridged those two worlds musically.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think what Leilani did really, really well was she was able to bring the technique of being classical and then bridge the gap with her knowledge of worship music flow and allow herself to not, what's the right word to say? Dumb down isn't the right way to say it, but more reform. Because that's like that's theological, almost reform her classical playing so that it was palatable in the worship setting. Um, but what I really wanted to highlight is like classical music is all about like using your eyes because you're reading music. Worship music is more tuned towards your ear. That's my opinion. It's tuned more towards your ear, because dynamics are really important in worship music. Not to say that they're not important in classical, but dynamics are more important than I would say technicalities are. Uh, and maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a drummer and I'm just, I'm very loud when I'm playing my instrument because it's just a loud instrument. But yeah, I think she did a really good job of that, like teaching us how to use our ear for worship music and use our eyes for classical music. Because I wasn't very good at reading music.
Mm.
I would lean into more my ear rather than I would reading the music, like on the sheets and on the sheet music. So yeah, I think you're right though. I do think a lot of players have a hard time like finding that balance between like not overplaying, but also playing for the moment. And I think that nuance is really like that comes with just time and experience. I mean, you can't expect like a 1 to 2 year piano player to know like dynamically where the worship leader is trying to go. Whereas you might be able to expect that from like a 4 to 5 year that has had consistent practice. So yeah, she did a really good job though of like teaching us to keep our eyes on the worship leader at all times. She did a really good job at that. Like, because she would use these are back in the days when there was no click track, which some of your young listeners might be like, wait, you guys used to play music with no click track, or
So I
tracks.
was a part of no in-ears, and we just had a wedge monitor on the floor, and you're giving hand signals
Yeah.
to the band. Yeah.
Yes. Hand signals, wedges, no inner monitors. Um, which I'm really grateful like that I grew up with that experience because it really taught you how to, you know, almost like the warriors in the Bible. I can't remember which leader it was, but almost there's the warriors in the Bible where there was the biblical leader that brought them down to the water. It wasn't Gideon, was it? He brought the leaders down to the water, like the warriors down to the water. And this analogy is stuck with me. And basically, the warriors that drank the water but were observing what was going on around them while they were drinking the water, he kept those ones, and everyone else he sent away. And she used that analogy with us. She said, you can drink the water and enjoy when you're playing music, but when you're leading worship, you need to like be observing like what the worship leader's doing, what your congregants and audience is doing at all times. Yeah. And I think a wedge monitor and no in-ears definitely helped with that. Because you're so isolated with in-ears now. I feel like that's a big thing with in-ear monitors. You're so isolated. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're helpful, but they can also be a crutch in their own right. So
yeah, definitely.
I like using them, but I never want to lose the ability to be able to just go sort of, if tech fails, and it does, if and when it fails, like the ability to still function and stay together as a band, like that's huge. And if your click track dies, it's a bummer, but you still got to play the song. And so are you ready for when that failure comes? So
yeah, for sure.
Leilani was a very big musical influence for you. Who were some other musical influences growing up, especially as you started to transition to drums?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's see here. Other big musical influences. I had a drum instructor named Kyle who was awesome. Kyle was my first drum instructor. And then after Kyle, I was instructed by another drum instructor called Kevin. And they were both very monumental. So Kyle was instructed me from a very young drumming career after I transitioned to drums, because there was a time of overlap. So I was still playing classical piano. I wasn't good enough to play on worship team with piano. So I just want to make that really apparent. I was only good enough to play. Well, I'll get to that story in a little bit. But Kyle and Kevin really helped me get good enough to where I could finally play on worship team. So I was finally good enough to play on worship team. I think I was 11. Wow. And I started playing in youth group. That was like the big push. Because to be honest, there was a vacancy in the youth group. There was no drummer, and they needed one. and they were like, "Well, Jack knows how to play music. He knows how to play piano. So I mean, he should be able to play drums." And I think
too, like, yeah, he should be able to play drums. Easy.
And I think at that point we had like a free drum set at home that we had gotten from some family friends, and I had like plinked around. And I think like they just threw me on like one night, and I just played, and like I think the rest is history. But yeah, Kyle and Kevin. Kevin he still instructs actually, which is amazing. He still instructs to this day. He's over near in my home peninsula where I'm from, which is the Kitsap Peninsula, up here, just outside Seattle. And yeah, he was really instrumental, like in inspiring me to like play drums. And then maybe as far as artists go, I had some musical inspirations there. Switchfoot is one of them, big inspiration. The Newsboys, although I'm not usually too bold about talking about them these days because they got caught up in a lot of drama recently, but it was the Peter Furler days when I was inspired by them. Let's see here. Switchfoot, Newsboys, who else? U2, and let's see, there's some other classics. Journey. My dad listened to a lot of Journey growing up. Journey also inspired me. I still listen to a lot of Journey even now. Let's see, and who else? That's pretty much it that I can remember from like a young age, as far as music groups go. As far as worship groups go, Hillsong United, like in the early 2000s, like you couldn't beat Hillsong United in the early 2000s. Those were like the good days. Yeah, and I think like Reuben Morgan, Joel Houston, those writers from Hillsong are just like incredible. Like they just know how to they know that in my opinion, they were able and still are when they do release an odd song here and there. So I feel like they don't release as much. Like they were able to perfectly marry the marriage of lyricism and musicality like together. I think some groups like struggle with one or the other. But like, there's some really good records. I think "The Stand" is still like one of the best worship songs, like of the last like 25 years. Like that is such an incredible song. Like it's just so good. So yeah, those are some of my inspirations. Um, yeah.
I love how when I asked you that question that it was people who were local to your church that worked with you one on one,
Mhm.
had that like that relationship with you and you built that trust. Like
Mhm.
those were the people that came to your mind first. And it's fun to talk about like the famous artists and the influences there. And
Yeah.
we have some overlap, like especially when I was in youth group, Hillsong United, Switchfoot, like those were all
Yeah.
that was the peak, especially of Hillsong United, like the peak of, in my opinion, of their worship music was just, it's all so nostalgic for me and was really inspiring. But I love how your mind went first to the people who took time with you
Mhm.
as a kid. You know, it wasn't even
Yeah.
you were a young adult, you were like in college trying to figure it out. Like you were a kid, couldn't even drive to, worship
Nope.
rehearsals or any of that. And these people took you under their wing. And now, however many years later, they are
Mhm.
still a huge part of your journey. So that's really
Yeah.
encouraging. And I want to point that out of, it can be easy, especially in the church world, whether you're vocational ministry or you're just volunteering. Like there's kind of this trope of Sundays always coming and
Yeah.
you go through a Sunday, you get through the services, and then it's like, okay, we're in another week of rehearsals, and then we're looking at another Sunday. And it can start to feel very routine and maybe even discouraging sometimes. Like, man, I'm just doing the same day in, day out. Like, every
Mhm.
week, is what I'm doing making a difference? Is this
Yeah.
actually impactful? And so to hear those drum instructors and that worship leader who was going, day in, day out, they had their
Mhm.
routine and they had their schedule and they were planning for services. But that's just an example of one impact that they made in your life.
Yeah.
I'm sure many others as well.
Yeah. If I could add to that too, like, like my my instructors were so rooted in the local church. Like they were incredibly rooted, and they knew that the creative talents that they had in instructing, but also playing, because they were playing in the local church. Like they they knew that they needed to raise up, the next generation of worship leaders. I was very young when I started playing, and like I was very young when I started playing in what we call big church, which is adult church, And what I really appreciated about that was like it wasn't like, oh yeah, we'll have you come on when you become an adult. It's like, no, like let no one despise your youth. My mentors were like, no, like you are a worship leader now, and most importantly, my parents saw that too, and so I'm just really grateful to them. My parents were very instrumental and like consequential in driving me to those rehearsals. You mentioned, getting to rehearsals. I didn't have a license when I first started playing music in the church, and we were just recalling this on when we had a visit a little while back. My parents and I were at dinner, and I looked at them. And I was like, "You guys realize there was a time in our life when I was just playing and leading worship on the drums as much as I could, because I just wanted to get that experience. They were having to drive us to rehearsals and worship services that my brother and I, my older brother and I were playing at and leading worship at, like 4 nights a week,
Wow.
like like just around the peninsula and wherever we were growing up. And I'm like, dang, like you guys spent like a lot of gas on us. Like gas is expensive. Like I'm an adult now. Like gas is really expensive. And so, and I think the leading reason why they did that was because like they also saw that youth and being young does not mean that you can't lead effective ministry. And God really just blessed us in that way. Like I didn't realize how good I had it, with all of that, and just getting to see people's lives change through music and through what the Lord was doing. But yeah, I just had to give my parents a shout out too, because I was thinking that as soon as you mentioned the driving part, I was like, wait a second, I didn't have my license when I was that age.
Yeah, and you didn't have it for a while if you started at age 11. Like that was
No, I did it.
several years that they were driving you all over.
Yes.
I did have a question speaking of your parents. So they started you in classical piano, and then you come to
Mhm.
them as, preteen, hey, I want to switch to drums. Was there any hesitation on their part, any resistance there?
I don't think there was any hesitation. So my parents were also fairly entrepreneurial, and there was a moment when a rock band uh, came on their radar called Remedy Drive. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Ooh,
And
familiar. Yeah.
yeah, they were in the Christian music festival circuits back in the day, and so Remedy Drive came on their radar, and they came to our church. So my parents brought them to our church and promoted them, paid them, 500 to $1,000, something like that, 500 to $1,000 or something, and they put on a show. And I think that was like the key moment for my parents were there and like, wait a second, because the drummer was really good. They were all brothers. First of all, they were all brothers. And the drummer was really good. The lead singer was really good. The bass player was really good. The guitar player, like they're all four brothers. And, my brother and I, my older brother and I, Britt, we saw them play. And I think that was the moment because that was in 2008. So I think I was 12. And I think that was the key moment for my parents where they're like, dang, like maybe Jack should play the drums. And they didn't decide this, but they were like, dang, maybe Jack could play the drums. And then Britt's like lead singer and they could like make a band. And like they didn't like tell us that, but I think they kind of like were like, well, maybe that could work too. Cause like Britt and I had been playing piano for so long, like side by side.
Yeah.
So I think that was the moment. So no, there wasn't really any hesitation. I mean, we had the drum set in the basement. And so, it is a loud instrument, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not. But.
Yeah. Just it was pure curiosity of, like I said, it's such a switch of especially classical piano to the drums. I'm just curious if there was any resistance there. But speaking of Britt, I would love to talk a little bit about how you guys started your musical journey together. So you are currently in a band called Becoming Bristol together, and if you have never heard of Becoming Bristol, I encourage you to check them out. They're awesome. What did that look like? Like, take me from initial concept of you guys talking about doing music together to where you are now.
Yeah, I think we'll do. Also, I'm in a coffee shop, so if that grinding noise is really loud, I can wait like 5 seconds and then it'll probably be turned down. I try to mute myself. Okay, it's gone. Good. Can you remind me of the question one more time?
Yeah. So walk me through you and Britt, started to say, hey, we'd love to do music together. What was the kind of initial, like, taking that from initial thought to where you guys are now with a full band,
Yeah.
shows and recording albums?
Yeah. So this question could get very long. So I'm going to attempt to practice to give you a very like punchy, concise answer. So Britt is almost 3 years older than me. I think he's 2.5 years. And he was already a few years into classical piano by the time I started playing. And so when I reached middle school, he was just about to enter into high school. So he was a little bit older than me. And the great thing about the great thing about brothers, excuse me, is that we are like built-in best friends. So that means that like I feel like Britt and I really think very similarly and we behave very similarly, but we also have like our differences. Britt is more intellectual and creative in an intellectual way. I feel like I'm a little bit more creative in an emotive way. And so what ended up happening is when Britt had this idea to start a band, he was talking with this other guy about starting a band. And so they were like, oh, let's make a band. And I had just started drumming. And Britt was like, wait a second. And he told this other guy, I can't start a band unless Jack is in it. Wow. So Britt was so sweet. And so Britt was like, yeah, no, Jack has to be in the band. And because he knew that I was really wanting to do music. And so I kind of got shoehorned in to the band with Britt and our other friend. And we did that. Yeah, I was in middle school.
Wow.
I was in middle school. Yeah. And, we started playing locally and like there were like, and the overall theme is, I feel like of my talking so far has been people just taking chances on me and on us, on Britt and I's career and, our band and bands that we've been in. And a lot of people took chances on us and we just kind of like just kept like the momentum going. And we went through a name change back in 2018, I think, 2018, 2017, around then. And so we were called one name before, and then we became Becoming Bristol. And from, I mean, there's been so many things that have happened over the years. Like I mentioned, Switchfoot being one of our big inspirations. We were able to play a sold out show opening for Switchfoot, which was incredible back in 2015. We played multiple music festivals on the Christian music circuit. We got to open for the Newsboys at a Christian music festival, which was really, really cool. Uh, and, a lot of those things just kind of came about from like persistence and, just being like, hey, like, what if we could do this? Like, I think a lot of people like don't realize that if you just kind of ask the what if question and then you do the thing that you might need to do to accomplish that what if, you'll be really surprised as to like what you can do in life. So yeah, I mean, some of the highlights: signed a record deal, was on a record label for a few years, made some really good memories touring. There was one point where we were touring like over 100 days a year. And what was really cool is because Britt and I had a worship music background, we were playing secular music, but then on Sundays we would sometimes come into churches and just be like, hey, like we just want to come into your church for free and just lead worship for you. And we would sometimes pick these churches where we could tell that they might need, some support and some love in that area. And it was a really cool ministry moment because like we got to like, serve and lead music for these churches. And then we also would serve them. And then we also weren't having to just, spend a day off on the road, like, sitting in the van in the middle of nowhere, Yeah. So there were a lot of times where we did that. And that was really, really cool. But yeah, and then fast forward to like today, COVID was really rough. We came up with a plan in 2019 to execute, the next year. And we all knew what happened, in 2020. And we kind of had to shift our creative mindset. And so where we're at now is we play shows regularly. We still fly out and we'll play shows or even lead worship sometimes. But we've shifted our focus onto like online content. And so like we put out a music video. Let's see, today is, we're recording this on the 29th. We put out a music video earlier this month, so 20 days ago about. And it's doing really, really well. We've reached 6 figures on the views already, which we're really excited about. So yeah, we just kind of shifted into more of a like content creation mindset. The touring industry is in a really weird spot. There's a lot of venues that are closing, even locally here in Seattle, which we're really disappointed in.
Is that a part of what happened in COVID? Like they just passed?
Yeah, it was really, really tough. I mean, I think a lot of venues just didn't recover. And yeah, it's just really, really tough. And so, Britt and I are heavily involved in our local church, in our local churches. He attends to his own church, and then I have a church that I serve at. But we still do lead worship and whatnot. But yeah, when I look back on the last, let's see, it's 2025. When I look back on the last, like 15, 18 years, I like, a lot of people look at me and they're like, you're so young. Like, how can you like, have all of this,
20 years.
I know, but I'm like, dude, I feel old because rock and roll years is a real thing. John Foreman from Switchfoot told us that one time. He was like, yeah, rock and roll years is a real thing. Like you age like an extra, like for every day you spend on the road, it's like 3 days in real life.
Like dog years almost.
It is. It's almost like dog years. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like a dog. Woof. But yeah, I think like I look back on my career and like, doing my first like national tour. And it wasn't even with my brother. It was with a different band. They called me up because we had opened for them at one point, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like, can you come fly down and leave tomorrow for a tour?" And I was like, "Hold on, let me ask my mom." I think I was like 15, something like that. I was like, "Yeah," like I think I was like just out of middle school or in middle school.
That's amazing.
And I put my mom on, and I'm like, and my mom's like, "Yeah, so." he can go with you, but you have to sign a guardianship form. And the lead singer of the band that I was going to go tour with was like, guardianship form? How old is Jack?
Wow.
And she was like, oh, yeah, he's 15. And he was like, oh, that's fine. And so I jumped on a plane, flew out, and I think I was gone like for half of that summer touring with this other band. I think they're still playing. They're called The New Divide. Shout out to Andy Ziesmer. Uh, yeah, yeah, great guys. In that band, two brothers actually, similar to Britt and I.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's a little bit about, I mean, that was a really long-winded answer, but like
Oh, it's so
it's just so hard to compress like 18 years and just like,
oh, yeah, for sure.
a short answer.
You mentioned, I mean, you guys were kids, teenagers, early
Mhm.
20s, and all these opportunities are starting to present themselves. And you mentioned like having the conversations like, what if we were to do this? Like just kind of dreaming big. What if? Um,
Yeah.
for those who are listening that maybe want to seriously pursue music as a career and would love to get signed and be able to tour, and you got to open for some of your greatest influences. Like that's not
Mhm.
just a common occurrence. How did you get there? Like you guys dreamed big, but how did you practically get there? What did that look like?
Yeah. How did we practically get there? And how did we like accomplish those things?
Mhm.
I think like I mentioned persistence, and persistence and assertiveness can get you so far in life, but also like in your faith too. Like if you're persistent and assertive with where you want your faith journey to be, maybe like you should like there's just no getting around it. You just have to do the work. But the thing about it is like being assertive and persistent when it comes to like cold calling a venue and saying, hey, can we open for this artist that's coming into town? And we will pre-sell 50 tickets, not only are you providing a service for them because they're going to need an opener, you know, shows need openers. You're also providing value because you are going to be bringing people to the venue. And so, in the venue's eyes, if you can guarantee it, but that also puts your credibility on the line because if you don't pre-sale 50 tickets, 100 tickets, whatever, that venue is definitely not going to call you back. So then it comes into the execution portion of your strategy, right? So yeah, I would just say even just cold calling and asking without any sort of uh, value attached where you're saying, hey, like I will do this for you. If you just cold call and say, hey, like, could we come and do this for you? Could we come in and open for, XYZ band that's coming into town? And then just seeing what they say, you'd be amazed at how many opportunities you can get in life by just doing that. And so that's my advice.
Yeah.
The answer is always going to be no unless you ask, and that's what I do. That's what I do. I'm like, hey, we should just ask. And Britt was really good at that. Britt would just cold call like nobody's business. My mom would also help book us sometimes when we were young. Like she would cold call and help book, and we would just book whole tours just by cold calling. And that's how we landed these opening slots on some of these big tours and some Christian music festivals. It was just we just cold called. We were like, hey, we found the producers from this music festival. Let's call them. And we were able to open for like 10,000 people at this Christian music festival. So it was really, really a good time. But yeah, that's my recommendation. If you have any young artists listening to this, do not be afraid in 2025 of Google searching, using ChatGPT to find phone numbers of people that you want to get in contact with, and then work on your elevator pitch. Work on your 30 seconds. Work on what your pitch is about what you can do for them, why it benefits them, and why you're good at it. Like those things will like set you apart
Yeah.
in a really, really big way.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Of one, knowing your worth takes putting in the hard work, and you guys
Mhm.
were honing the skills and the craft at a very early age, and you had put in the work and the time by volunteering in your churches. You'd had lots of experiences and lessons, like you put in the work, so you knew your value. But then really key of what you said is, what value can you bring to them? What value
Mhm.
bring to the venue or to those artists, or even to the audience that you're trying to get in front of? I think it can be it can be easy to want to, well, I'm good at what I do, so doors should just be open to me. Like it can be easy to have that attitude, and that's not the case. Like people, most of the time, they're not going to listen until they see it or they see the value in it. And so, what are you offering? What value are you bringing? I think that's a huge part. And I think a lot of, we see all these artists that blow up and it seems like they just get famous overnight. And you always have a long list of Grammy nominated artists. And it's like, man, it seems like they put out one song and they just blew up. But it's all of these things behind the scenes, like all the work that they're putting in, all the cold calls that they're making, all of the, them
Mhm.
value to the table that we don't get to see. And so if you're going to pursue it, like go for it and make the call. And like you said, the worst that you can be told is no. So you're not losing anything because you didn't have that
Yep.
before, but you have to put in the work and be ready for it.
Mhm.
And I think the words of John Foreman are, that's something to consider. Like the rock and roll years of like tour life, I can imagine is grueling and it's exhausting
Mhm.
and it's super rewarding, but you know,
Yeah, for sure.
that
Yeah. Tour life was definitely like, I mean, life changing. Getting to tour and play music, and what was really great about it is like my mom homeschooled all of us brothers and all of us brothers. So I have a younger brother who's also classically trained in piano. He is the best out of all of us.
pretty.
Uh, yeah, he's really amazing. He just played actually with an orchestra slash symphony last week, and he was a featured artist. So yeah, he's the best. But Britt and I mean, it's just so hard to like. It's so hard to say like. It's so hard to put into words how instrumental my parents were.
Mm.
Like my parents are so instrumental, and like being homeschooled and being on the road for 100 days out of the year, there's like you can't get around not having that flexibility with the schooling and everything. And my mom really put up with a lot with us because we were like spending hours practicing our instruments when we were at home, because we were at home 2/3 of the year, but then we were on the road for the rest of it. And then we would be like you know having to like hit the books and write papers and like do all these different things. So yeah, that was really, really great too, like being homeschooled. And there's actually, what was really great is as I got older and I was in like touring and playing music and in the circuit, I learned that there's like a lot of artists that are that way as well. Billie Eilish and her brother were homeschooled. And like that was a big reason why from a young age they could, tour and all that. Justin Bieber as well. Justin Bieber was homeschooled a little bit as well.
All the Disney kids, like the
Yep.
our age, Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, like all of them
Yes.
be homeschooled and be
Yeah.
in yeah, making their
Hmm.
all that. So hey friends, before we jump back into today's conversation, we just want to say we're so glad that you're here. And today's episode is sponsored by us, Creative Tides, and by you. This show exists to bring expertise locally, real voices, real insight, and practical wisdom into our creative community. As a nonprofit, everything that we do as Creative Tides is made possible by people who believe in that mission. If this podcast has served you, one way you can support it is by giving a one-time or recurring donation or by purchasing something from our merch shop. As a thank you for being here, we want to offer you 10% off the merch of your choice. Head to creative-tides.com/merch and use code podcast at checkout to receive 10% off. Every contribution helps us keep creating, hosting conversations, and bringing expertise closer to home. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss any upcoming videos, resources, or events. Thank you for being part of this work with us. Now let's get back to our conversation. So, what was the family dynamic like? And even now, not just when you were first starting, but you and Britt are brothers and built-in best friends, but I'm sure that as brothers, there's probably this different level of competition or sometimes attention that comes than maybe just typical bandmates. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. I would be remiss to say that my brother and I, my brother Britt and I didn't come, come to blows and fisticuffs when we were, in our younger years. But I think like with that conflict came a large amount of healthy communication that had to come through. I think like I realize that everyone's relationship with their family, it may not be like the healthiest, but I think like what was really crucial for Britt and I to get to a place where our communication was good, especially when we were like in our formative years, was saying what the other person had done that had hurt us, like it's even when it came to like being on stage together, where like we're on stage and he does something and then we would always have these debriefs after we would play. We'd have debriefs, and because it's one thing to like even playing a worship set with family, like you play a worship set and you're really close with somebody, there can be things that happen on stage where you're like, man, like that doesn't feel so good like when you did that, you know? And so there were times where we would have those debriefs, and what we would do is we would call it cone of silence, because it's like when after we had led a set or played a show, we would get in, our parents' Suburban or the van, and then it's like once we're in there, then we can start having a healthy conversation. Because the worst thing is when you're trying to have a healthy conversation in an environment that is not going to allow you to have a healthy conversation, And I think a lot of couples, like especially in church, might like struggle with this. Like if you're trying to have a conversation right after you heard a sermon in the foyer or the lobby of of your church building, like dude, you need to be in private, like be in private, be in a safe spot. um and so that was really important. Like we would hash things out in the band van. And I think there were some years where we had to learn like what it meant to adopt an honest policy of like, let's be honest with one another and let's just say what the other person has done that's hurt. But what's really great is like the years of conflict led to like years of like complete flourishing. Like I look back on the ministry that Britt and I got to do together with my parents and my little brother. My little brother would come on the road with us too, and get to join us, even though he had to sit in the middle seat. Bless his heart. Yeah, bless his soul. He had to sit in the middle seat. Uh, we just got to experience and see so much like ministry like occurring. And there's so many stories I could share with you, but like seeing like recover like playing shows for like formerly incarcerated people and recovering addicts, like recovery houses. Yeah. And like those are the shows that really stick with you, where you see these people like just have a smile on their face, whether you're leading worship or playing like rock music, and they're getting to experience like what I got to experience from a young age, getting taken to shows, you know and feeling like the bass drum thump through my chest, through the subwoofers. Like that's my favorite feeling in the world. Like that anticipation is just the best feeling. And it like leads you to like think about higher things. And I think that's why God like made music. Um, so yeah, I can't even remember what your question was, but like I got very spiritual there. Oh, we were talking about brothers.
Yeah, no, I love it though, because my next question, this is a great segue. So you started in the church and then you guys were out on tour and together, and you were also doing stuff on your own. And you did mention that on Sundays you would sometimes pop into churches and lead in worship. But um, was there ever kind of getting outside of the church world when you were in that season of touring and being more in the industry? Was there ever moments where it was hard to come back to the local church, or was it a a reprieve to come back to the, because obviously you guys are still both involved in churches. So
Yeah.
If you did have kind of a deconstruction phase, you've circled back and you're now playing. What was that like? Like that's a very different world than the local church. Like what
Yeah.
expected in that season?
I definitely had my own deconstruction phase, but thankfully it was during a season of reprieve from music. We weren't really putting out a lot of music or making it. So, but that's a story for another time. Maybe another podcast. But I would say that having one foot in the secular world and when I say the secular world, I mean like the secular music industry, and then in the church music industry, You would think that there's a lot of differences, and there is, but like being put in the position that Britt and I were, it was very fluid for us. Like there was some nights where we would play in like the diviest of dive bars, and we would play our original music. And you like we would look around, and we would, we were working with a sound guy who we had just met, and he was, smoking 10 cigarettes in the alleyway like 30 minutes before our set. And then he comes in. It was almost like, because we went into that venue with a purpose, that we turned that venue into the church,
Mm.
and like, so it just felt very fluid. It never felt like any space that we went into. Obviously there were spaces that we went into where it was like, dang, like we might get stabbed in here, like we would think that, I was like, dang, like we better be careful that we don't get shot in here. Um, but like, it was very rare that we went into any secular music industry venue or space, and we didn't turn it into a space that felt comfortable. And not because we brought in, lights or road cases or drums or tablecloths or anything like that. It was just because we were in that space, and like, we felt like we belonged there because we came with a purpose, and the purpose of, trying to make a difference in whoever's lives that we were interacting with there. I will say did come a period where we wanted to, play more music in secular industry venues. And not because we didn't like what we were doing in the church, but just because we felt like our growth was being very stunted, being in a space that was really familiar and really comfortable. Like we felt like we were able to play like shows, like, play to, shows that were being promoted, and there was like 150 people showing up, and which was really good for a band of our size. And we're in the middle of nowhere, like in the Midwest or, in the South. But I think that there had to come a time where like in our growth, where we had to push ourselves and be like, okay, we want to play in venues where we're going to feel challenged. Mm-hmm. And, and that was a big change that came just before we changed our name to Becoming Bristol. And it was a really good, it's a really good season. It was a really, really good season. Like we started playing at local venues in the Seattle area. El Corazon is one of them, historic venue. Numos is another one of them. One venue that we've always wanted to play in, but still haven't gotten the chance to, is the Showbox at the Market in Pike Place, which is iconic. You know it very well, I presume. Excellent venue. They tried to tear it down during COVID, which was really sad, but it's still there, which is great. We also got to play the Crocodile as well, which is a historic venue. Unfortunately, that venue is also going away which is really, really sad. And they've already moved once. So there's the original Croc, which is the one where like Soundgarden and Nirvana played at, and then they moved down the street. And we played at that venue. We played at both venues over the years. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough to it's tough to like weave, but we did it somehow. We did it somehow. I think a large reason why we were able to do it is because we had faith. We had faith, and we were able to like make sure that we were like leaning on each other in really dark spaces. I mean, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol and all sorts of stuff in secular industry music venues, and it's not to say that, alcohol, for instance, is a bad thing. But thankfully, because we were all there together and like as a family, and like, the rest of my bandmates and I, like we all kept each other, accountable and stuff. And I think it's pretty incredible that like, we were able to do that and like maintain our ministry mindset too. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Bringing it back to the local church, what encouragement would you have for worship teams, tech teams, worship pastors on a local church level? What encouragement would you want to offer them?
Yeah, I think I'll try and keep this one short. Like, I think a really important thing for the local church, tech teams, worship artists, Because no matter what level you are, you're a worship artist. I hope everyone here listening to this realizes that. You spend a lot of your time preparing for what I call the moment. I heard this from someone, or I think I read this actually one time. There's a music artist that I think I read this from, but I don't want to quote him because if I get it wrong, someone in the comments of your podcast or something is going to come for me. But I remember hearing that as artists and music artists, especially, and just technicians in the church and whatnot, we prepare for what we call the moment for the whole week or for a few months or for a few years. And then our moment comes and then we have to execute and deliver in that moment. And that's not to say that we have to be perfect. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that when that moment comes, I think it's really important that we're prepared and that you're prepared, because there might be like a move of God in your church. And we're seeing this right now across churches across America right now. There is revival happening. And this is like the moment. And to be honest, there's a lot of vacancies with worship leaders and worship pastors. And I mean, I won't speak for you, but I see there is a lot of need because the harvest is great, but the harvesters are very few right now. And, I think my biggest advice is just to always stay ready, always stay ready, like, because your moment could come. And, there were moments in my career where like we were told, hey, like, can you fly down to, do this thing? And hey, by the way, can you fly down tomorrow? And it's like, well, shoot, like if I wasn't ready, like I couldn't go do that and participate in a really cool moment, and the same thing happens in worship services. If you're leading worship from the tech booth and you're the front of house engineer and you didn't spend some time, in the word, in, the manual for the front of house audio console that you're running, knowing how to do a certain thing to, compress, the lead singer's voice because they did something different that you weren't prepared for, and like you should be doing those things so that you do stay ready, because we're called to excellence. The Lord wants us to not just be you know making noise, but making like a joyful noise. And joyful means that it's bringing happiness not only to you but to the people that are hearing it. So yeah, that's a little bit of my advice that I have.
Yeah, so good, so good. I have a few fun questions as we kind of wrap up our time here.
Great.
Talking about like a rig rundown. Do you have a preferred drum kit that you like? What in-ears do you use? Are you running the?
Yeah.
Tell me all the technical things.
The reason I'm wringing my hands right now is because I love talking about gear. So let me give you just the rig rundown. As far as in-ears go, I am pretty simple. I don't run custom in-ear monitors just because I like being able to switch out the tips that are on my in-ear monitors. So I run triple driver Shure's 535s as my like middle of the road baseline monitoring. And then I can swap out the tips to get different isolation because I don't like feeling too super isolated. I felt like with custom in-ears, like I got some fitted and I tried them out and I was like, man, this feels really isolating. I don't like this. So that's why I run those. I also run some KZs. I run some KZ 12 drivers. They're part of the Chinesium, run of in-ears that we've seen in the last 5 to 6 years. They're really, really great. The reason why I run those is because sometimes I play with worship teams that have volunteer players. And so I want to run the in-ears that they might be running. So it's a really common in-ear type that volunteers are running. And so I want to reference the same things that they're hearing. I don't want to hear something differently than they do. I want to hear the same things that they are. So that's my in-ear monitor rundown. As far as drums go, I've been a Zildjian cymbal player for a really long time. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just really love those cymbals. I think they're really, really well made. Specifically for any of my drummers that are lurking in the comments or in this podcast recording, I love playing Zildjian K lights specifically. The hi-hats, the crash cymbals, the light ride. They're all really, really good. I also have some K-Light sweet rides as well. Let me see here. As far as drums go, as far as shells, I love playing. I have an SJC custom snare, which I really, really like. I've had that for a long time, almost 10 years now. And then for drums, I have a old discontinued D drum kit, which is made of maple and ash. It has a really pretty sparkle finish. I'm a bit of a sucker for a sparkle finish. It's just really just simple and classy. Diecast hoops. I use all DW hardware, DW 9000 hardware, really heavy duty. My parents gave it to me for Christmas, which is like every drummer's dream. I got that when I was in high school, getting professional duty hardware. And then I just got another drum kit. I got a DW performance kit, which is really, really great. I would have never thought as a young kid that I would ever own a DW kit because they're kind of like the cat's meow of drum kits. And that one lives at my brother's studio. I only use it for recording or music videos that we make. I don't take it on the road, and I don't think I ever will because it's my baby. Um, Let me see. Drumsticks, ProMark drumsticks, extended long drumsticks because they just feel the best. 5 beat long. Although I was trying Vader drumsticks for a while there, and I just kind of flip between the two, whichever is on a very good deal. I would like to talk about pianos. My favorite piano is a Schimmel piano. They're made out in they're made in East Europe. There's a couple of different spots. The reason why that's my favorite piano is because it's the piano that I grew up on, and it's a really well-made piano. My parents have a grand piano just sitting in the middle of their living room because they took out basically like a down payment on a house that just paid it for a piano. So I'm really grateful about that. Yeah, I love that piano. Whenever I go home, I have to at least play it once, like for the holidays. I just have to sit down and just play something on it. Yeah, let's see here. What else is in a rig rundown? Let's see, air monitors, drums, cymbals, drumsticks. Oh, tracks. Tracks. We run everything in Ableton Live. And then that's for everything Becoming Bristol. And then I do a lot, and I fire the tracks. Sorry, drummers, you're going to be the ones firing the tracks until there is a playback tech. If you have a playback tech, you're doing really, really well in life. If you have someone running playback.
So you're tracks, but you're not MDing, correct?
I do MD, but I don't MD for Becoming Bristol. Yeah, we really don't. We've wanted to have MD mics, and I think there's room for us to have that. Like Switchfoot runs MD mics. They have two or three stations on their stage plot. I would love to get to that point, but I don't MD. And then I also am really good at running multi-tracks. Like the software product. From the worship software product. I've gotten pretty good at running those. Yeah. Do you guys run those at your church?
Yeah, we use Playback.
Mm-hmm. Playback, nice. Yes. Yeah, Playback. That's what it's called. Playback. Yeah, by multi-tracks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've gotten pretty good at using that. So yeah, there's a little rig rundown.
Yeah, I love it. Last question. Can you share a most embarrassing stage moment?
Yeah. I was thinking about this when you asked me, because this is a question that people have asked in the past. So this is like a Jack staple. I hadn't played a show in a long time. And I was like 14 or 15. And we would play this sold out show. And there was a girl that I wanted to impress that was at the show. So it's perfect. It's the perfect marriage. It's there's the girl, there's the people there. It's my head is so big. And it turns out my head was really big. Too big, in fact, because I headbanged so hard that I threw out my neck and I couldn't hold my neck up. And we had to stop in the middle of the show because I had headbanged too hard. I had thrown out my neck, and it turns out they got on the microphone and asked if there was a doctor. And there was a physical therapist there, and she I'm laying down, and she was touching my neck and stuff. And she was like, "Oh yeah, you definitely tore a muscle in the back of your neck." And so I literally couldn't hold my head up, and I was like, okay, so can I like play the show? And she was like, no, you can't play the show. And so that was probably my most embarrassing moment. Like I literally went so hard to try and impress, this girl and, all these people at the show. And like I threw my neck out. And it's still like one of those staples that like when I'm back home for Thanksgiving or Christmas with my family, like they're always like, hey, like, do you remember you like threw your neck out that one time? And I was like, oh God. So what's really funny is like even to this day, I have to be really careful. Like I don't if I go too hard, like I'll feel it the next day. So yeah, to all you young drummers out there, like don't headbang too hard because
We're not invincible.
yeah, you're not invincible for sure.
The things that we do for love.
No, it's pretty funny. Yeah, you do some silly things when you're in middle school. Thankfully, that was one of the more silly things I had done.
Yeah. Well, it's been so good talking to you. If people want to learn more about you and your music, Becoming Bristol, where can they go?
Yes, thank you for asking that. You can check us out on Instagram or on Facebook. Just look up Becoming Bristol. Bristol is spelled like the standard spelling, like Bristol, UK, like the city in the United Kingdom. You can find me on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. I don't know if I can be added on Facebook, but I think you can follow me on Facebook. I tested it out the other day and I was like, why can't I be added on Facebook? This is so weird. Yeah, it's just something that happens apparently. I'm going to try and get that figured out. But yeah, Instagram, Jack of Bristol. So JACKOF and then BRISTOL. And then my band is on YouTube. Becoming Bristol's on YouTube. And we're also on I already said Instagram, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you can find music. We're also on there. And yeah, you might see some aviation related stuff from me too on my personal Instagram because I'm also a flight attendant. I call that my health insurance job in case I throw my neck out. So yeah, and if you follow me, send a DM. And yeah, man, it's really good being on the podcast with you, Ashley. Thanks for reaching out and wanting to have me on.
Yeah, thank you so much. What is the significance of Bristol, by the way?
Of the name? Ooh, that's a really good question. This is a really great bookend to this podcast.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So there is a old myth about a man named the Earl of Bristol, and the Earl of Bristol is sort of a pseudonym for what Jesus was like, because this guy named Bristol, he would go around to all these towns in medieval Europe. And a big reason why you now see like these hotels and other places that are called the Hotel Bristol or the Cafe Bristol or like all these things was because he had like made an impact in that area because he was so generous, he was so kind, he was so inviting, loving, kind-hearted, selfless. And when we were coming up with the band name, we were like, how can we, in a cheeky way, say that we're about becoming like Jesus without saying we're like becoming like Jesus, and who knows if he's sort of a mythical legend. Like not many people are sure if he like existed or not. And that's not to say that Jesus, we don't know if Jesus existed or not. We know that Jesus existed for sure. I know he did. The historical accounts are very, very like top tier. But yeah, that's kind of how we came up with the name. We're like, how can we do this? And so, yeah, getting to share that is always a real privilege because, like, especially with a fellow believer like you, because when we're out on the road and we're in these secular environments where, the Lord's name might be a little off-putting, we can share that story, and people are like, "Oh, I really, really like that." And then it's almost like a seed has been planted in their heart a little bit,
That's super cool. Yeah, I'm glad that I asked. That's a very cool story.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you asked. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been so great talking to you, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon. I would love it.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Ashley. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Creative Tides podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss any upcoming resources. If you'd like to support Creative Tides, including events, workshops, and tools like this podcast, head to www.creative-tides.com to make a donation. Thanks so much for being a part.